This is Quantum Cowboy yet again, and this is just going to be a really quick video on a couple quick things you can do for free, and emphasis on the word quick, to clean up sort of messier audio. So if you're doing a podcast and you want people to not have to like crank their volume way high to listen to it, or have to like pump their volume up and down, I'll just show you a couple quick tricks in a program called Audacity. Audacity is a free program, audacityteam.org. Just go here and go for whatever platform you're on, hit download, install it, super easy. Now prior to this, I recorded a bit of a sample. It's just like some garbage saying, hello, welcome to my wonderful podcast. And there's a couple problems with it. So when you open up an audio track, what you're going to see here, this line is supposed to represent the volume over time. So like the spots where you see this little bit, it's louder, and the spots where it's flat, it's quieter. So there's a couple problems with this particular track. One of the problems being that it's too quiet. The other problem, and if I just hit play for a second, if you listen. Hello, and welcome to the most amazing... Nope. It's so quiet you can't even hear it. So we'll have to fix that, obviously. So let's start by, if everything is just way too quiet to even hear, you can't really fix something if you can't even hear it. So first thing you do is select all of it. And by the way, you can either go to Edit and select all, or Control A, which is what I did before. Control A. Go up to Effect, Amplify, and we can just bring this up. You can hit Preview, and that'll let you hear. Hello, and welcome to the most amazing podcast. So now you can hear the audio a lot louder and clearer, and you can play with the amount that you're going to bring this up. What this is going to do by default when you do Amplify is bring the loudest part of the sound in the audio track to 0. In digital terms, 0 dB is the loudest possible you can do. Anything over that is distorted and clipped and just sounds like garbage. So you want to avoid 0. So I would say for your average speaking thing, you'd want to stay around -9. Some music will go to about -3 usually. You might get away with -6, but even that could be a little bit boomy in somebody's ears. So this is going to be probably good enough. So now, as I was mentioning before, what you see here is a visual representation of how loud the sounds are on this recording over time. So where I'm speaking, it's loudest, and where I'm not speaking, it's quieter. But you notice the line isn't particularly flat, and if I just play this, you can hear that there's, and I deliberately did this, as you can hear right now, there's not as much background noise on this, and I'm not using a great mic. This is just a gaming headset I'm on right now. I do have better mics, but I just wanted to do this nice and quick. So the first thing you want to do is get rid of any background noise. So you always want to start your recording and have dead air for a few seconds. I've got about 3 seconds of dead air. It's probably more than necessary, but just so that really gives you an idea of the point. So the first thing you want to do is you need to generate a profile of what the noise sounds like. That's why you need a little bit of time where you have some complete dead air from your microphone. So you select the dead air part, this part that's supposed to be quiet, go up to Effect, Noise Reduction. And then the first thing you do is, step 1, generate noise profile, which it does from the selection you made. That's why I made this selection of just the noise. Now, the second thing you want to do is select all of it again, and that's, again, you can go to Edit, Select All, or Control A like I do, Control A. Now, this is, when you select all of it, you're saying that this is going to be step 2 in the noise reduction. It's going to use that profile to take that sound out of the sound. So if you just hit preview right off the bat. Hello, and welcome to the most amazing podcast. does a pretty decent job. You didn't hear much of the noise. And actually, if you click on residue, you can actually, with the preview, you can hear just the noise. And then when you hear the voice, it's taking the noise even out of from the microphone, even out of the voice, but it's also getting a little bit of the voice itself, and that's where this sensitivity and smoothing and the amount of reduction, because it's a lot of noise in this case, I'm doing the maximum amount of reduction. And we can play with this sensitivity, and you can switch between these and listen. So for example, if I crank this sensitivity way up and hit preview, and this is listening to the reduced one. Hello, and welcome to the most amazing podcast. Now it's taking way too much out of the voice. So and actually, if we go to residue, we'll hear the opposite. We'll hear some more of what it's pulling out.
Hello, and welcome to the most amazing podcast.
Yeah, ideally, when you hear a little bit of speaking in this noise reduction, what you're looking for is, and in this case, because the noise is pretty specific, we don't really need it much higher than 1 or 1.5. And then you can play with smoothing to see, smoothing sort of makes the amount of reduction more gradual instead of more harsh. So that can have negative consequences, like if I crank that way up, it's going to get all the noise for sure, but it's still pulling a lot of the voice out. So probably 3 is pretty close, and you're never going to get no sound. You're never going to get no sound of the voice out of there. But the problem, of course, if you go too low on these, you're going to hear that.
Hello, and welcome to the most...
It is actually pulling out a lot of the noise, but you're leaving enough of the noise that it becomes a really weird digital sound, and that's where you want to sort of finagle this.
Hello, and welcome
right
to
there
the most
is probably
amazing
perfect.
podcast.
So you want to finagle these until you got a nice clear sound in the quiet parts. Where it's supposed to be quiet, it should be silent. You shouldn't be hearing any fans or road noise if you're recording in a car or whatever it is. And of course, with something like road noise, you're never going to get rid of all of it. Like if there's a car that goes by with like a Harley that blows by you, there's no noise profile is going to pull that out. You could theoretically select it and delete it. That's another thing I could show you real quick, but let's go ahead and apply this. Just hit OK, and you'll see that these quiet parts here become a nice flat line, and if we play them, silence is golden. What I meant by is pretend that this was a Harley of the driving by. You can just select it, hit delete, and it's gone. Of course, if you're speaking at the same time, you can't do that. So that's the first thing, is cleaning up background noise so that you don't have that distraction in the background of your podcast of usually it's going to be like a humming or a constant noise is what it's for. It's not for individual sounds. It's for a fan or an AC unit or a refrigerator if you're near a kitchen. Different kind of things that are going to cause a constant noise. The second thing you're going to want to do, and now this is optional. It might be less optional if you're recording a podcast with multiple people and they're at different volume levels. This is pretty much mandatory. If it's just you by yourself recording, it's a lot less mandatory. What I'm talking about is called compression. And we actually don't have to worry about selecting the parts where there's silence. So if we go up here and select the compressor, now there's a lot of dials here and you don't have to worry about it very much. I'll quickly explain it. The noise floor is a stupid setting that only Audacity has. Professional grade tools don't even have this knob, so just leave it at the bottom. Don't leave it at the top. Leave it at the bottom. The idea behind this is supposed to be ignore anything above the noise floor. So below the noise floor. So it's supposed to ignore background noise when you're compressing, but really it doesn't make a difference. So just forget that one. The only settings that matter are threshold, ratio, attack time, and release time. And I'll really quickly explain what those do, or what the whole thing of a compressor does. So basically, when you're speaking, there's a difference between talking really quietly and talking really loudly, right? That's called the dynamic range. It's the difference in the audio track between the loudest part and the quietest part. And what a compressor does is it basically takes the loudest parts and brings them down by a ratio. And so in this case, 3-to-1 is for every 3 decibels louder, it only actually goes up by 1 decibel. That's really all it is. So if I was to crank this way the hell up, this some people consider this a limiter, some people consider more higher, which this compressor doesn't handle, but a hard limiter is like it gets to this volume and never goes louder. It just cranks. It's like having a little robot hand turning the volume down for you at a certain point, and that point is this threshold. So one thing you want to do is sort of see how loud you are on average to get an idea of what's going to be your average volume, and then set the threshold just above that, and then let it start pulling back anything that gets really loud above that. Especially if you have a podcast that's really boisterous and you get people talking really loud and aggressive, and then you have somebody else that's talking a little more quietly and more calmly, you're going to get it's going to be hard on people to listen to that really loud bit and then having to sort of really like strain to hear the quiet person. I'm going to say, based on what I'm looking at here, that actually, you know what, I'm going to cancel. Actually, what we should do is we should just play this.
Hello,
and just look.
And welcome to the
so
most
we can
amazing
see that the peak is
ever.
around -9.
This is
and
just a sample.
The average is around 18 or so.
Amazing
16,
fun
18,
we are going to
somewhere
have
in there.
Today.
So let's jump back into the compressor. So we'll set this down to, let's say, 16, which is roughly where it's at. And by the way, all the radio hosts and stuff, they all have a compressor on their voice, because what it allows you to do by bringing the volume down on the loudest parts is it allows you to bring all of the volume louder so that the quiet parts are louder and the louder parts are a little bit quieter. So it, like I said, it squashes that dynamic range. So the difference between the yelling and the whispering is limited. Now, obviously, you don't want to do something like 10-to-1 because that's going to be really obvious. You're going to hear, it's going to be very unnatural. Attack time is how quickly it's going to start turning the volume down. And release time is how quickly after it turns it down is it going to turn it back up for the quieter parts. Because it's voice, just talking. In music, you might play with this more, but in just chatting and talking, you're never going to need this to be higher. In fact, it probably wouldn't be very good if it was much higher, because you'd end up with it, if especially release time. Imagine if you had it, release on like 5 seconds, and you have somebody yelling, and then immediately after that somebody talking quietly. Well, it's still going to be turned down when the quiet person's talking, so that's no good. I don't like using makeup gain because it tends to make it too loud, and I'll show you really quickly the last step, which is the way I would do makeup gain in this program. And compress based on peaks is fine. The only difference is it compressing on the average volume over a period of time, or is it compressing on where it spikes? And in general, the spikes is what you want to do. The only reason you would ever turn this off is if you had like a clap or something like that. You'd have basically a full line of volume in the waveform. In that case, that kind of thing, if you don't cut it out but just selecting it and deleting it before you do the compression, then you might want to turn this off. In general, the average podcast, you'd want to leave it based on peaks, and that's fine.
Hello, and welcome to the most amazing podcast ever.
Yeah.
This is just a...
You notice that at the end it was... well, let's just apply this. You'll notice it'll bring all of these up because it's making up a little bit of the space between the two, and the difference between the quiet parts, these parts were much quieter than these parts, is lot less drastic. And the very last thing you do, and this is not optional, so even if you don't touch the compressor at all, say you're the one that's speaking by yourself, you've cleaned up the room noise if you had any room noise, even if you don't have any room noise and you skip the noise reduction entirely, because some people have a nice quiet room. I mean, even then, if you have a sensitive enough microphone, you'll pick up like your computer fan even. So it's even that can be noticeable, and that's useful to get rid of. But the very last thing you should always do is set the volume to sort of broadcast level, and that's a process called normalization. This is this like easiest thing. Even if you don't, again, even if you ignore compression and noise reduction, assume for 1 second you have a soundproof room and you've got this perfect recording space where it's dead silent and all you hear is your voice, and you've skipped noise reduction and your dynamic range is perfect because you've spoken evenly the entire way through. You still want to make sure that your volume is at the right level, and that doesn't just mean loud enough, that also means not too loud. So that's why you don't just go to Amplify and turn it up to a certain, try to get it to a certain level. You want to go to an option called normalize, which is right below noise reduction, normalize, and the default is going to be -3. Sometimes I've seen it as 0. This is going to be insanely loud. People are going to be turning their computer speakers down. For music, and bear in mind, music has quieter and louder parts unless it's way too compressed. Even for music, usually it's about -3. For speaking, you're going to want to be slightly less in your face than music, because music, again, has a good dynamic range, and it's so what I would start with is something like -9. -9 is a good level, and that actually brought it down a little bit. So if we play this.
Hello, and welcome to the most amazing podcast ever.
So you can see the dynamic range is right in here.
This is just a sample of the
amazing, yes. We could try it a little bit louder. Again, I would not go anywhere higher than 6. 6 might be pushing it a bit loud. Don't worry too much, by the way, about normalize stereo channels independently. That's not going to matter because these are going to be identical, because unless you're recording on a stereo microphone, which tend to be expensive, which is and completely useless for voice, because people's voices don't come from two different angles, they come from one angle. So even if that was the case, you wouldn't want to use that. The only thing you need is normalize to maximum, and the DC offset is, again, this could be on or off. This doesn't really matter. This is to do with stereo. The only thing that matters is this middle one here. So
hello, and welcome to the most amazing podcast ever. This is just a sample of the amazing.
So, I mean, with my voice, I think it's probably better a little bit lower, maybe even -8. Could probably do that. And that's probably going to be good there.
Hello, and welcome to the...
By the way, if you have a lot of extra space, you could just select it and hit the delete key on your keyboard. Right, so you could tighten up your audio track. If you want, you could even go and you can add another track in here. This is actually a multi-track program. If you go to Tracks, Add New, and we'll make it a stereo track. If you wanted to do something like add music, let's go to see here, where is... I don't have a whole lot of stuff. Let's just say we're taking the first few seconds of this. I'm just going to copy, Alt Tab, back over here, go back to the start, paste. And the envelope tool allows you to set volume, basically. So we can have like an intro, essentially. Right, so let's say I have this much of an intro, go back to the regular tool, and then what we'd want to do is select this, use the time shift tool, just move this over so that the voice starts after. And again, you might have this in the background throughout the podcast even, right? So
Hello, and welcome to the most amazing podcast ever. This is just a sample of the amazing fun we are going to have today.
anyway, you get the idea. Obviously, this is going beyond the original scope of the video. The real point of the video was the simplicity of just select everything and normalize as a minimum just to get the volume level up to around -9, -6, somewhere in that range. You can play with it, hear how it sounds with your voice. Using the noise reduction is a really key thing if you're in a noisy environment when you're recording. And then compression is going to be really important if you happen to have big dynamic range. So again, this is going to matter more if you have multiple different people speaking and some of them are at different volumes. Like if you're on Discord and you're recording, somebody through Discord and their mic is really quiet and you weren't able to balance the levels very well, the compression will help with the final mix down. You can just compress it and that'll generally fix it so you can hear everybody clearly. I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions about audio processing stuff, feel free. I'm going to post this as media. Go ahead and take a look, and if it's helpful to you, let me know. And if you have any questions, if anything was really confusing, there's lots more stuff you can do with this program, but really the basics is all you need. Again, hope it was a helpful thing, and happy podcasting.